Good morning. The reading this morning is from Matthew 6, 5 through 15, and it's concerning prayer. And whenever you pray, do not be like the hypocrites, for they love to stand and pray in the synagogues and at the street corners, so that they may be seen by others. Truly, I tell you, they have received their reward. But whenever you pray, go into your room and shut the door and pray to your Father who is in secret. And your Father who sees in secret will reward you. When you are praying, do not heap up empty phrases as the Gentiles do, for they think that they will be heard because of their many words. Do not be like them, for your Father knows what you need before you ask him. Pray then in this way: Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come. Your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts, as we also have forgiven our debtors. And do not bring us to the time of trial, but rescue us from the evil one. For if you forgive others their trespasses, your heavenly Father will also forgive you. But if you do not forgive others, neither will your Father forgive your trespasses. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God.
I'm going to talk about a subject I don't know a lot about today, and that's prayer. So if you thought I was an expert, we maybe have to get a guest next week. Let's pray. Be in our listening. Be in our remembering. Be in our body, mind, heart, soul, feet, that we might just be a prayer. Amen. Last week I was in Toronto. I had agreed to be the speaker at the 60th anniversary of my mother's church, my home church in North Toronto called Forest Grove United Church. And it was a great service to be there with about 100 people, some who'd been there 60 years, which is the age of the church, and some who were brand new. And as you come into that church, they have a sign over the door, and it says this: a house of prayer for all people. A house of prayer for all people. Now, this is the banner that people have walked through for 60 years. My father was a minister there for about 10 years in the 80s. And I began to imagine to myself all the different kinds of people who walked through those doors with different prayers in their hearts and their minds. There may have been a couple coming to get married, and there was prayers of hope. There may have been a family coming at a time of grief and prayers of sorrow and sadness. There may have been a person coming that day who had done something that week they couldn't forgive themselves for, seeking a sense of forgiveness. There could have been people there who were dragged, wondering, when is this service over? There could have been people who were coming to that church over the years, 60 years. Many things happened trying to connect the newspaper of 60 years and the church at 60 years. A house of prayer for all people comes from Isaiah 57, a statement. This shall be a house of prayer for all people. Now, the banner we have outside the front of this church is, whoever you are, wherever you're at, join us. And there's a sense in this community that we recognize that people come here to pray, but to eat, to drink, to serve, to study, to learn, to grieve, to celebrate. A house of prayer for all people is part of that phrase, whoever you are, wherever you're at, join us on the journey. But last week it got me thinking about, what is prayer anyway? What is prayer? No matter what we do, we still have a childlike image of some guy in the sky with a beard sitting on a cloud, checking if we're naughty or nice. It's part of our development, that kind of initial idea of some guy in the sky. Sometimes we think of God as like if we just get the right shopping list out there and get the right words, things might come our way, and there's hope in this. My friend Garth Muntle, who died recently, reminded me in a conversation years ago that prayer is ultimately about connection. Prayer is about connection. Because in this community of faith, we trust that God is both mystery beyond us, unknowable and yet very known, and yet part of each and every one of us. A pantheistic God is what we trust and believe. If I had to say it off the top, I would say prayer connects us to this mysterious sacred source and also to my truest self. That in prayer I'm trying to and seeking to connect beyond, but also within to my truest self. Yes, who among us didn't pray for warm weather this week? Or who didn't pray for a parking space this morning? Or who didn't pray for your favorite team to win? All of us do these kinds of, we know them, they're kind of gut, immature prayers. Nonetheless, you might call them prayers. C.S. Lewis, who is one of the great writers and speakers of the faith, said in the 60s, I pray because I can't help myself. I pray because I am helpless. I pray because I need to, and it flows out of me. It doesn't change God, it changes me. Now, that would have been a pretty radical statement in the 60s, that prayer doesn't change God's mind in the cloud, but actually changes us and our heart and who we are. I did a little bit of reading by a book by Anne Lamott called Help, Thanks, Wow, where she looks at these three kinds of prayer, and she helps me get that there maybe are three kinds of prayer. The first one is really help. Who hasn't cried out in a prayer, help me do this or that? There's a sense, she says, where this is where we let go and realize I'm not in control of everything. God, help me. But letting go is a theological word called kenosis, means letting go, self-emptying. The help prayer is really throwing up your hands and saying, for God's sake, help me. The Serenity Prayer for persons who have been addicted know this one: God grant me the serenity to accept the things I can't change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. That is a help me serenity prayer, help. My prayer, to be totally honest, friends, is always like it was already this morning, and it will be tomorrow and the next day and the next day, is this: God be with me. When I enter into a difficult conversation or a funeral like this week, or when I enter into a wedding or I enter into a Sunday morning, God, what am I going to say today? There's a sense in which I say, God be with me. And there's a letting go and a trust. Two women in our community who had babies about 10 days ago celebrated the birth of twins, and that very next night, her mother died in the Maritimes. What do you do when you have birth one day and your mother dies in another part of the country, never getting a chance to see these grand babies? In a phone call conversation with her, I said, what can we do, Sam? And she said, John, you can say the Hail Mary, which I had to look up, and here's the words from our Roman Catholic brothers and sisters. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb. Jesus, Mother of God, pray for us now and in the hour of our death. Amen. Sometimes when we're in those kinds of situations, we return to what we knew and what we learned, which she would have learned as a child. That's a help kind of prayer. Hail Mary prayer. Or this morning at 6:15 in my bed, when I shut off the alarm and a text popped up, it was from our friend Diane Hutchison from the congregation living in BC saying, "Pray for me today. I'm flying to Ontario. My father will die today. I hope I'll get there in time. Pray for me," is another kind of prayer, and I share that with you now. We all pray help prayers. The second that she says is thanks prayers. Gratitude, friends, is a thing that I hope we all cultivate in our life. The people who are the most grateful are the most wonderful people to hang around, because out of them there's a sense of joy for the littlest and greatest thing they have discovered in their life. Thanks prayer, Anne Lamont says, reminds us of the deep gift right before our blind eyes to see. Sometimes as parents, we might try to teach our kids prayers. Right now in our house, when we only have dinner, we only pray for dinner. I don't know, maybe we're not thankful for breakfast and lunch, but generally it's dinner. And when we get to dinner, we sit there and I simply say this: what's the high point of your day? And if I forget, my 8-year-old quickly reminds me, what about? And we go around the table and we say something we're thankful for. That simple question, even if it's just you and a friend, might be a way in which you deepen your understanding of the day. And so we evoke the things that happened that day. And I learned something about a kid in school, or I learned something about someone that Anna worked with that day. There's a sense of connection that happens in the sharing of this. I also know, and maybe you parents have taught your kids to pray at night. And I was always wondering why we prayed, "Now I lay me down to sleep, pray my soul to God to keep, if I die before I wake." What the heck kind of prayer is that? How many people learned that one? Yeah, that should be erased from our memory. So we had to change it in our house. "Now I lay me down to sleep, pray my soul, God to keep. Jesus, hold me through the night, wake me in the morning light. Tomorrow may I bless and sing all the goodness I shall sing." You find your own words. The point is, you don't want kids going to bed thinking they're not going to make it through to the morning. Unless you've had a bad day and you wish that on them, I don't know. But anyway, when I think about gratitude and I think about prayers, truly that centering into gratitude takes a bit of time. And when I think about gratitude, and I've shared this story before, but you need to hear it again, I was taught by my father, who is a minister, but that doesn't really matter. I was living in Kingston, and I got the news that my 27-year-old brother, who'd been married 2 months, died. And I had to get in a train from Kingston all the way to Toronto, and then the subway up into Toronto. And I got to the subway, and my dad met me. He embraced me, didn't say a word to me. That's okay. We drove to the house, and it was dark. And it was dark at night, but it was also dark, metaphorically, hey? Come into the house, we get to the table, and we sit at the table. And my dad says, "Let us pray." And he says, "For what we are about to receive, we are truly thankful. Amen." Or he said, "For these and all other blessings, we are truly thankful. Amen." Now, if you think of it, there might be a day when you think, that's a day I'm not going to pray. I'm really mad. But there's a sense in which prayer is a ritual. There's a sense in which prayer is saying thank you even in the midst of our sorrow and our grief. There is gratitude. And so I learned that from him, and I try to continue that in my own life. There's times we need to center, no matter what's happening, because religion isn't a game that makes things better for you necessarily. It invites you to know that you're not alone, and for that we say thanks. The third kind of prayer, she says in the book, is wow. And you've already talked about it today. Tammy has said, wow, awesome music. When your breath is taken away, when you've seen something, heard something, paid attention to something, and your breath is taken away. It might have been when you met your lover for the first time, or saw the birth of a child, or heard good news, or saw bad news on the news, and your breath is taken away, and you say, with breath, that is a prayer. So she says, help, thanks, wow, but I want to add one, and I won't write her, but I'll tell her, I think you need one that's called prayer is also prayer with legs, because I believe that prayer is ultimately about having legs on our prayers. I remember the day that I was doing prayers, and I went to the back row over here, and there was a woman put up her hand, and she said, I want to pray for my son who's addicted to videos in my basement. Now, friends, I never would have prayed that, not because I didn't have a son, because I did have a son doing the same thing, but I never thought of a prayer. And she raised that, I want to pray for my son who's addicted to videos. After the service, two other women came over and said, mine too, me too. Those three came to me and said, what do we do? And I said, let's call someone and hold an evening to learn about how we deal with teenagers addicted to videos. And 14 people came. Do you see how it's a connection, one person to 3 to 14, to legs changing the world? Yesterday morning when I was writing some words that I would say at the funeral yesterday for Garth Mundell, the celebration of life, I heard his voice as I was reading the Globe and Mail. He said, God damn it, stop thinking about me. Trump is building a wall. Get off your ass. And that's what he would have said. There's a sense in which his view for the world was, yes, this is important, but the world is where we've got to be fully engaged. And I think prayers get legs on us and out in the world. And yes, he would have said those exact words if you knew him. I also think that prayers have legs when they evoke something within us we didn't even know we had. You know the story in Ottawa in 2016, the war memorial and Nathan Cirillo standing on guard. You know the story of him standing on guard when someone came into downtown Ottawa with a gun and began shooting people and in fact shot him. And you also know a woman I can't wait to meet someday named Barbara Winters. She was going the other way, away from what was happening, and she stopped, and she turned, and she walked back, and she went to Nathan and bent down on her knees, cupped his head in her hand, and she said, you are beautiful. You are an amazing person. You've served your country. And she saw the ring, and she said, you've been a great family person. You have done so well in your life. You're a beautiful person. Then she began to recite the Lord's Prayer, and he died. What an amazing thing it is to be the person who gets to hold someone in their death. You may have been there, and to recite gratitude, affirmation, and maybe even a prayer. That is prayer with legs on. And maybe we'll be called on one day to be that kind of angel for someone else. Maybe. Maybe today, maybe this coming week. So that's prayer with legs. I'm going to write Anne Lamont and say, I think he forgot a couple of things. But what about Jesus? You heard that passage that Sarah read, and if you're reading it, you're going, oh my gosh, what's that about? You need to know that Jesus talked about prayer about 27 times in the scriptures, that the Lord's Prayer is in 2 of the Gospels, and they're quite different, and the words come together in the song that you sing on Sunday morning. When you look at Jesus, I look at the very last week of his life to get a hint about prayer for Jesus. Jesus, like you and I, goes to the Garden of Gethsemane. When he knows the end is coming in a certain way in his life and it's going to end up on a cross, he waves a white flag and says, if there's any way out of this, now's the time. Have you ever said that? If there's any way out of this, now's the time. And then he ends up on the cross and he cries out like you and I have all cried out, my God, why have you forsaken me? Ever been forsaken? My God, why me? He calls. And then he moves and he said, nevertheless, not my will, but your will be done, O God. And then he says these beautiful words, into your hands I commit my spirit. A beautiful pattern Jesus offers us in the last days of his life. And I've been thinking about that passage where it talks about being a hypocrite, standing and publicly praying, and how does that fit? For me, I want to think of this metaphor, and when the scripture talks about don't stand out in public, but go to your private closet. I think this is a coming out story where Jesus is talking about the difference between ego and spirit. And prayer ultimately is not about our ego or an agenda, but it's actually that letting go and that becoming naked in the sense of spirit. And we do that with the inner closet we all have. That's where we go for that kind of prayer. I don't know what you think, but that's what I think that prayer is about. That warning that it's not about what you say out there so others can see, but actually what you and I all go to, which is our inner self, and no one goes there but us. The connection to the sacred source and our true self. For me, last night at 3:15 in the morning, this phrase came to me. Prayer isn't what we do, it's who we are. Prayer isn't what we do, what we say, it's who we are. And that's where we're clean, honest, no one to impress. It's from the gut, and it's intimate, just you and the source of life. It can be scary, but ultimately it is that kind of intimacy that we're after. In this community, we have the opportunity on Wednesdays, 7 in the morning. Oh, I can't get out of bed. 7 at night. Either morning or evening, to come to this place that centers in silence. Because I got to tell you, at 58 and a half years old, it's really not about the words. It's about the silence. It's when I allow myself to stop talking, when I don't worry about anybody else around me, and I enter into that intimate place of the sacred source and myself, my true self, that prayer really happens. And I invite you to hear Richard Rohr. It's 2 minutes when he talks about this very same thing. 2 minutes.
What is prayer? You know, I think we made prayer into very much a left brain, verbal thing. And I do think there's a place for that. But the very fact that the disciples had to ask Jesus for a verbal prayer could give you the clue that that isn't what they had previously been talking about or experienced. So I'm going to say this, that whatever you do in a state of communion, connection, love, use all of them equally, is prayer. Whatever you do outside of a state of union is non-prayer. So that's why, action and contemplation can come together and really be one. When you're acting out of a state of conscious, loving union with what you're doing, with God, with the person who's across from you, I sincerely believe that's the deepest meaning of prayer. So prayer is primarily a stance. It's a way of being in the world that is a connected way, a way of love and communion, instead of a way of judgment, analysis, critique, you see. And once you recognize that, then you can, for example, when the gospel says Jesus prayed for 40 days in the desert, does that mean he said words? I don't think so. But that he walked around putting one foot in front of the other in conscious, loving union with God, his Father, with that rock, with this guy, that's prayer. And that's why twice in the letters of the New Testament it says pray always. Now they can't really mean this verbal thing. They've got to be talking about a state of consciousness. And in many ways that's much harder to maintain. To really do even very secular things, so-called. Of course, then you find out there's nothing secular, because you can do everything in conscious, loving union with God. The dishes, driving to work, making love, whatever, when you're doing it in union, it is a prayer. And I sincerely believe that. I'm not trying to be clever. I believe that.
Conscious attention, I think, he thinks, maybe you think, is prayer. moving ego aside and trusting soul or spirit. Last thing I want to say on this is a story from your community, but many of you are new, so you got to hear this story. I was taught by a 16-year-old what prayer is. Comes to our community a number of years ago, had Lyme disease. Riley Lindbergh, you know him. You know, for 2 years, we thought we were doing his funeral at least 4 times. Lyme disease, which we don't have in Alberta, apparently, means that you are literally laying on your bed paralyzed. The sheets over your body is too much, he said. His parents brushing the teeth just down the hall, too much in his ears. The leaves on the trees outside the window, too much for his eyes. The sensitivity is huge. Miraculously, through the support of this community and the medical community, he became well. But he remembers that when he was laying there one day, his dad came to him and said, "Riley, I know you just want to get out of your body, and it's okay to go." Now, when Riley came out of his illness to his health, he said to his dad, "Dad, you need to know, I remember you telling me that, but I didn't have a desire to escape my body, to transcend to heaven or anywhere else." He said, "How I survived was," get this beautiful line, he says, "I descended to my soul." And there, as he descended to his soul, he thought of the people he knew, the faces he knew, the places he'd been, all the beautiful things in life. And he descended there in his soul to gather the strength to get well and begin again. And that, to me, is what prayer is. It's a descending to our souls. It's conscious awareness. It's a place we all know and all have. That's what I think prayer is. May God be with you and your help, your thanks, your wow, and maybe even your legs as you descend to your soul and come alive in this world. Thanks be to God. Amen. So this hymn, it's Black History Month. It's the favorite prayer song of Martin Luther King, and I just really like it. Precious Lord, take my hand.